This is the IVJ podcast for the week of May 13th, 2024, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Our guest this week is Jesse Rice, who took a circuitous route to becoming one of Indianapolis's most unpredictable arts, entertainment, and community entrepreneurs. He grew up in a blue-collar family in a small town, and then went to Purdue University with hopes of going to med school. He flipped his focus to finance and ended up working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car and J.P. Chase. He and a friend started kicking around ideas for a venue where they could serve their own beer and feature live music. And as Rice says, I think of something I want that needs to happen, and I just somehow make it happen. So was born Black Circle Brewing Company, just west of the intersection of 46th Street and Keystone Avenue, which opened in 2016. In addition to craft beverages and some family-friendly areas, it features a broad spectrum of entertainment, including heavy metal, drag, and comedy shows. Rice bought out his partner 2 years later. In 2019, he opened an eclectic spot a few blocks to the west called Loom, which became the new home of Black Circle's brewing operation, as well as a co-working space, a bar, a pinball parlor, and a coin-operated laundromat. Just last October, he bought a 99-year-old building at 3317 East 10th Street that once was home to American Legion Post 465. Now in the midst of a renovation, Rice envisions this project as an event venue, a recording studio, and temporary accommodations for visiting musicians. Rice readily admits he had no grand plan when he started this path 8 years ago, but there, of course, is something to be said for making it up as you go. In this week's edition of the IBJ podcast, Rice discusses how he developed the first two venues while maintaining his career in corporate America, and then in 2019, pursuing an MBA. He also details what he learned in the master's program and how that changed how he ran Black Circle Brewing Company, the umbrella firm for all of these projects. And he takes a look back at what he's created over 8 years and what he thinks is most valuable. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Jesse Rice, owner and co-founder of Black Circle Brewing Company. Jesse, thank you so much for making time to come to the studio today.
Mason, thank you for the opportunity.
So we had a brief exchange on email about the possibility you might be coming in here just loaded with construction dust.
Yeah.
And I told you this isn't a video. You don't need to worry about it.
Yes, which I was relieved about.
But you cleaned up very well. But let's talk about the project that you've been working on most recently. Kick it off for me, because I know even the name might even be in flux, but what have you been working on?
Yeah, name's in flux, concept generally fleshed out, but basically we weren't sure last year if we were going to be able to re-up our lease at the Black Circle location on 46th Street. So I have 24 employees now, and I just thought I'm the kind of person that must have a backup plan. So there can be anything falling through the cracks. I have to have a plan. So I had previously looked at this building at 3317 East 10th. It was the old American Legion. And it just sat there for, probably 20 years, not doing anything. So the city had a repair order on it. It really needed a lot of work. And the first time I walked through a couple of years ago, I thought, this is not going to be it. It's just too much work. But with the pressing issue of a lease possibly not being, renewed, I thought I better look at that thing again. And I got lucky. The repair order had been placed since that first time. The owner was motivated to move it, and I actually got it for a lot less than he had asked for it for the previous year. So I know before we started the podcast, you asked about numbers. He had actually offered it $250 the previous year, and I ended up getting it for $155 with that repair order on it.
Wow.
Yeah. So definitely affordable. It's half as much as what my rent is at Black Circle, so it didn't scare me to maybe bite that off, especially owning it.
At this point, are you solid on maintaining the Black Circle bar space?
Yeah, so luckily that has all been taken care of. And actually, someone had called our current landlord because they saw the Black Circle van at the 10th Street location and asked if they had any space to rent in the 10th Street, in their 10th Street building. And he was like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a 10th Street building. So that's how he found out that I had it. But I haven't put ink to paper yet, but we have agreed on terms as far as re-upping the lease.
Okay, for the lease.
Yeah, so I believe that'll go through 2028.
Okay, the lease will be good through 2020.
Yeah, the lease at Black Circle, the original location. Yep.
So what is it that you have planned then in the meantime down on 10th Street?
So for 10th Street, Black Circle has sort of evolved over the years to more of a venue space. So we do shows generally Tuesday through Sunday. There's some type of live entertainment going on. It's not always music. Sometimes it's comedy or a drag show or something like that. But we always have a need for an audio engineer, some sort of a PA system. Sometimes it's just like a setup like you've got today, a couple of XLRs and a couple mics. But sometimes they need 40 channels and 2 mixers, 1 for monitors. And so we just have to have all this stuff on hand. For the most part, we don't use all that. But again, during COVID, we also fleshed out and had like a lot more gear on hand because we had to do things outside. So we have all this gear at the new building. The engineers really wanted a studio space so they could do non-live stuff. So studio stuff, studio recordings. We're also going to house the Black Circle audio things there. So that's an offshoot of Black Circle Brewing and Music Bar, where we might go produce a festival, say at Pax Verum. We've been in with them and Red Curb out in Plainfield. Some other places have, we're dipping our toes into just helping produce shows outside to just up the quality a little bit and keep our engineers busy too. So we have 3 engineers on staff. They also work at Old National Center, but we sort of work the calendar together to make sure everyone's busy all the time.
Okay. So then on 10th Street, you would have a recording studio?
Yep.
But it would also be an event space potentially?
Yeah, so it's about 7,000 square feet. And the cool thing about this building is mixed use, and there's an apartment upstairs. Sort of our idea here, and we just have to see how it goes because I'm not sure there's anything exactly like it, but I'm sure there probably is somewhere. We want bands to come when they're coming in town, say some band comes to the Hi-Fi and they've got a couple days off. Maybe they'll play the show at Hi-Fi, but they'll come do a KEXP style thing at Black Circle Audio. Maybe they'll record an EP there. They can stay upstairs. Or maybe we'll invite a band from in and out of town and do a residency for a few days and they can stay upstairs and record with us while they're there. So anyway, just having all these possibilities available for a band coming through, I think is a great opportunity for us to grow as well.
So what kind of work are you doing on the building right now?
There is a repair order on the building. I'm learning as I go here. So there's a difference between a demolition order and a repair order. The demolition order would, I assume, be going to an imminent demolition of the building, whereas a repair order, no hearing, they list some things that must be repaired on a certain time frame. They give you 2 years. Every 90 days, there's a progress report. Every 180 days, that's a violation period. Well, I inherited a no repair order when I bought that, and I was aware of it, and we were actually able to negotiate the price down a little bit because of it. But the things on the repair order were replace the doors. There were no doors in the building. Replace the windows. They had all been stolen. Put a new roof on it, things like that. So I went ahead and did those things. And the repair order inspector said, finally, that's great. We're going to try to dismiss this early. The very next week, I got a stop work order from a different inspector for installing windows. So I'm sure someone's going to be listening to this being like, well, yeah, you had to have a permit, but nobody told me I had to have a permit to do a repair order that they ordered me to do, So anyways, we're on a stop work order right now. So what we're doing and how I'm messy today is we saved all the old doors in the building and we're putting new hinges on, routing out hinges, doorknobs, everything, trying to do as much as we can ourselves as possible.
So it's about a 100-year-old building.
It's 99 years. Yeah.
Okay.
It's built in 1925. We're trying to get her in tip-top shape for her 100th birthday.
Yeah. When would you expect to maybe people to host an event there?
So actually, I already went ahead and this is how I do. I just scheduled an event already for October 24th. It is our Dead Formats, which is, we've done this for, I believe, 4 or 5 years at Black Circle. But if you go into Black Circle is actually just a literal name for a vinyl record. That's all I really meant by that.
Oh, that was one of my questions. What's the significance of that name?
And my brother and I, our first business was a VHS distribution company. And that sort of happened by accident too. Someone asked us to put out a VHS as a promo for one of their independent movies, and we sold them all immediately. And then we discovered this world, and my brother's probably more privy than I was, but we discovered this world of VHS collectors. And it's not like vinyl in the way that vinyl is considered a superior audio experience. VHS is objectively not a better experience, but a lot of times there are things on tape that never made a digital release or you can't see any other way. Plus, of course, the packaging. And I guess that's where vinyl is similar, where you can have this tangible asset, something to look at. But anyway, I've got all those tapes over there. I don't remember where we were going with that.
I was asking you about Black Circle.
Oh, this dead formats thing.
Oh, dead formats, right.
Yeah. So anyway, I've relinquished control of that to my friend Noelle, and
right. And this is a festival.
Yeah. It's more like a flea market, really, but it's centered around tangible physical media, thus dead formats, and people set up our table and sell their wares, anything they've picked through it, Goodwills and stuff like that. So it's a good first sort of thing to just make sure everything flows right and the bathrooms work, and it'll be easy.
You're breathing in all kinds of dust in a 100-year-old building. Is this anything like what you thought you would be doing when you graduated from Purdue in 2006 with a degree in finance?
No. And I think probably to myself 2 or 3 times a week, I actually went back and got my MBA from Kelly School too. And I think to myself, I wonder how many of my MBA cohort are changing this chain on their chainsaw right now. It's like probably not too many, but I grew up in a blue collar family and I just don't know how to stop working. So I think my strongest asset is just this anxiety I have to keep moving forward and manifesting things to happen. So I think of something I want and that needs to happen, I just somehow make it happen, So, and if it means I have to work 80 hours a week to do it, I'm happy to do that because otherwise I'm just standing around doing nothing, So yeah, the MBA program at Kelly, I would recommend to anyone too. I mean, it was definitely incredible.
This is IU Kelly School of Business.
Yeah. Yep. I went back to that. So I was a grad in 21. So I did that partially during COVID, but roughly 20 years after I went and started undergrad. So I think I wanted to prove to myself that I knew what I was doing. And in some cases, I reinforced myself with the classwork, but a lot of it was for me just, understanding new concepts, but understanding that I'm not going to be the expert on everything. And I really just need to find people that are those sharp tools and keep them around while, like I said, I'm manifesting things. I'm more like a sledgehammer than a scalpel or something,
So you came from a working class family, but you go to Purdue in finance. What was the attraction to finance?
I actually had no idea what I was going to do. So my dad's a small business owner. He still owns a small asphalt company in northern Indiana. My mom was an office manager for a now closed company called Futures Investments Company. I don't know if you're not allowed to say companies online, but it was a futures management company. They're closed now, but I actually went and did biology, and I finished biology at Purdue, but I had a 3.1 GPA. My faculty advisor was saying, you're not going to get into med school with a 3.2. It's not going to happen. So we need to talk about a different route. So junior year, having finished the biology route, I just transferred all those science and math credits over to the next logical thing, which was follow sort of what my mom had been doing in finance.
Some of that was transferable to finance.
Oh, yeah. I took just about every math class that you could take at Purdue because I went to this tiny high school and I just was terrible at math. And I'm not saying the teachers were bad. I think they were fine, but I just could not wrap my head around it. And so I started from the bottom at Purdue, and I think I took just about everything that you can take there. So I'm pretty good at math now, but yeah, so that stuff all transferred over. You have to, for the finance degree, you have to have a lot of science credits and stuff. I did stay a 5th year. I did 44 credit hours my last year, and 2 of the classes had to be through the mail because they will only let you max at 21 hours per semester. So it was a wild 5th year, but got through it.
I'm with you, man. I was a 5th year too.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got the degree. What do you start doing when you get out of school?
Undergrad?
Yeah, when you get out, in 2006.
Well, I fell into this. I got recruited by a large insurance company, Carmel, and I went there and found that I was able to get my series licenses and get some foundation that I was going to end up needing at the banks anyway. So my roommate worked, this is wild, but my roommate worked at the airport Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And I just got a job there so that I could keep moving along until I figured something else out. So I worked at Enterprise for 2.5 years, making nothing. But I did my deposits at Chase every day, and every single person that worked in there worked at Enterprise before. And they said, you got to come over here, man. It's a completely different world. So that was my chance to get back into finance. But I was really trying to not have to ask my parents for money. Just like anybody, I had to phone a friend once in a while. But yeah, I mean, I took that Enterprise job. I do not regret that. I would definitely recommend it to anybody starting out if they wanted to, but it's not something that was really using what I wanted to do.
So when I landed Indianapolis, I need to rent a car. I go to the Enterprise branch location and I meet you.
Yeah. At first it was me. So they would send you out there to do like a training thing, before you work in a local branch or sometimes after you work in a local branch. I did become a manager there. And then they moved me to the Fort Wayne airport to manager. So I drove from Broad Ripple to Fort Wayne every day.
Oh my God.
But I had a free car and free gas, free insurance from them. So, I mean, I was 24. I didn't care, So yeah, I lived at like 59 block of Carvel, right at those Monon Place apartments. So, and I would drive to Fort Wayne airport every day.
Then you go to work at Chase, J.P. Morgan Chase.
Yep.
And then what were you doing for those guys?
I started as a personal banker. They have gone through many iterations of what they call a banker, but obviously having this background in small business and finance, I moved towards doing business banking more. When I moved to the Chicago area, I moved into private banking. And then when they expanded their private banking sort of brand into Indiana, Carmel was one of the first places. And that was an opportunity for me to come back. So I was transferred down here as a private banker into the Carmel branch.
And about when was that?
That was 2014, March of 14. And that's about the time we started sitting around talking about, my assistant at Chase was a brewer. And he was the assistant for the bankers at the Fishers branch when I was there. And he had always talked about opening something. So that was our chance.
So the two of you get this idea. We're going to what?
Listen, I was still in my 20s and I was thinking, I had this house. I was living in Broad Ripple. One of the coolest things about Bloomington was, as opposed to, and for listeners out there, I'm always going to be a Boilermaker, but the social scene in Bloomington when I went to visit my brother just blew my mind. It's completely different than at Purdue. So people would always have these basement parties. So I would just invite my friends and bands. And in fact, our band would play in the basement sometimes and have people over, and Dan, my other partner, would brew all the beer for us. And then this guy, Bob, would make all this Cuban food for us. So the first iteration of Black Circle was Dan was brewing, Bob opened a Cuban restaurant next to us, and then I put on shows to the best of my ability. It was really just a bunch of dumb kids thinking they should make a business out of what they're doing in the basement, which worked out.
So the Black Circle Brewing Company opens at that location, and was it 2016?
Yeah, we did our first show in October of 2016.
And you're in what is called Refinery 46, which my memory is going to be faulty on this one. It was a renovated space that formerly had, some sort of like a commercial use. It was
previous to Refinery 46, it was the Double 8 grocery store food warehouse.
Right. Thank you.
So the elevator was broken. There were forklifts full of cans of food from 1970s and just junk everywhere. And I think before that, uncovered on the front, it was some miracle cleaning brand called Sutho Suds, and it's still etched into the stone on the front of the building. So
it's a beautiful building.
It's
beautiful. They did a great job with renovating.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was also serendipitous. When they were buying that, they had another partner, and he came in to do the wire transfer to buy the building, and I talked to him about it, and I ended up being the first tenant.
Explain to people what the space is like now. If I was to go check out Black Circle at a friend's behest, what would I see?
So we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but we've sort of moved away from calling it Black Circle Brewing Company because people were coming in looking for a brewery experience and wanting a brewery tour, and we don't actually even brew on site. My original sort of muse for the space was this place called Local Option in Chicago. And I walked in there because it was on the brewery list, and there was nothing. It was just a bar, and some guy was working on a motorcycle behind the bar, and we were the only ones in there. And I thought, what on earth? And the beer list was like probably 60 taps, and the last 3 on the list were the ones that they made. So you could just tell they like beer and they wanted to make beer, but they weren't out there like waving their flag in front of everybody. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's, if you're making something you're proud of, you should do that. But these guys were just like, come in and get whatever you want. We're going to be working on the motorcycle. I just thought that was so cool. So Black Circle Music Bar, it does not present as a brewery. We do make some of our own beer, but we also buy a lot of guest beers. We also sell a lot of PBR and old style. And basically it's come in and have whatever you want. enjoy the show, and there's not really any pretense about it.
Okay. And so, I think you mentioned, you have live music several days a week.
So we're only closed on Mondays. Tuesday through Sunday, we have some form of live entertainment. So it's usually live music. And usually on those bills, there's 3 or 4 bands or even 5. So we might do 20 bands a week. And then we also do alternative stuff like comedy or drag or trivia or something like that.
So there's an interior space that we would call the bar. But I mean, you've built out like into a patio style area a little bit. And
yeah,
I mean, getting to the point of it being sort of, quote, family friendly, end quote.
We are all ages. We do have the rails up. We encourage folks to bring out their family if they feel that's appropriate. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it may be too loud, or subject matter is, again, we're leaving that up to parents if they want to do that. It's interesting because my favorite band is Wilco. And so I ended up with this metal bar. But we talked about Black Circle just being this, like, I guess it's like this ambiguous concept, but it sounds like a metal bar. So the metal guys attach themselves to it. I've grown to really love a lot of it. I didn't not listen to any metal before, but I definitely have to listen to a lot more of it now. Yeah, and it's just this niche concept. And of course, in business, you're looking for a niche concept to be able to push your interests forward and make things better. And metal music and alternative stuff has done that for us. We're one of the only places in the city that do it on a regular basis. There are definitely a few others, but certainly we weren't the first or the last or anything like that. But I would say we're probably indie. We call ourselves Indie's home for heavy music. But yeah, I mean, you go in there, there's stickers on the walls. People have written on the walls. We kind of let people just do whatever they're going to do within reason. We're not breaking things or anything. Actually, some people come in from across the street and they say, this is the cleanest dive bar I've ever been to. Because I make them clean everything every night, So, and for a long time, I did it myself. But now that we've got so many locations, it's impossible.
And you initially did brew at that location.
We did. Yep.
Okay. And then we'll get to that in a second. And throughout all of this, you still have your day job.
It was on and off. So I kept my day job till we opened. Then I left. Dan stayed at his day job. And then at some point, he just left. We couldn't really pay both of ourselves. So I went back to work so that he could brew. And I worked at Chase from like midsummer of 2018. And so I took like a year and a change off. I worked for 2018. And then I ended right before COVID. So another 2 years there.
And then Dan was involved for a couple of years, and then you bought him out?
Yeah, Dan was my original partner. He was the SSA at Chase that I spoke about earlier. Yeah, we had some creative differences. For the most part, we were good friends, but ultimately, he's starting a family, and there was pressure to make more money and be home. And I don't blame him at all for wanting to leave, but he decided to leave. So for someone like me, it's an opportunity. It's sad that we split ways, and I think about that a lot, but it's an opportunity for me to be able to unilaterally make decisions about where I want the company to go and not have to ask anybody about it too.
Okay, let's take a quick break so we can hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm, with more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and my conversation with Jesse Rice, owner and co-founder of Black Circle Brewing Company. We get to 2019, and a concept comes about called Loom. Now, tell me about that.
Again, sticking with this idea of this like ambiguous name, I just thought I'm going to call this thing Loom. I don't know what it means. So it keeps people guessing, but sort of the idea is we always joked about this video where Rush was playing. They were sort of poking fun at metal bands, and they would have, instead of Marshall stacks in the background, they had washers and dryers spinning in the background on the stage. So I just thought that was funny. We could have washers and dryers during a metal show at Black Circle. And I thought, well, we needed something to wash our towels, wash our stuff anyway. So let's get washers and dryers and put them in here. We'll have an amenity for the neighborhood. So I'm not just opening another bar, on the street. Washers and dryers, the staff use it. Most of the staff still does their laundry there when we're not open. Yeah, and then it's just more than being functional. It's something people can be like, have you heard of that laundry bar? You can go in there and do your laundry. So we get a lot of people that bring the rugs in just so they can sit in there and say they did it, And again, not an original concept. A lot of people immediately mentioned Sudsy Malone's to me. I'm like, okay, cool. But there's how many breweries are there? There's almost pushing 10,000, so there are not many original ideas left out there.
So the brewing and beverage making operations go to this location, which is about 3 blocks to the west.
Yeah, it's 3 blocks west.
On 46th Street. So you have a bar, you have coin-operated laundry, you have a pinball room, including, I might add, a Rush pinball machine.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the basic concept. And starting in 2019, you open up in March 2020 and go.
2 days later, we get a full shutdown. And we're thinking, you said you visited Loom and one of the lava lamps fell over. We bought those because originally I was thinking, I'm going to make this place be like you're going back home or something like that, Well, when the pandemic started, I thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to buy a lava lamp and put it in the window for each day of quarantine. And we were calling it, we were just like putting one up there thinking this will be over in 20 or 30 days or something like that, because originally, was it like 2 weeks to flatten the curve or something like that,
much,
So we're thinking this will be done in April. It'll be no big deal. Well, I got to like 37 lava lights and I was like, I better stop wasting money.
Wait a second. Where did you get the lava lights?
Oh, I think I just got them on Amazon. They're like $15 a piece.
Oh,
but I just stopped wasting money on that stuff. But yeah, so we opened and immediately we just had to pivot.
It said in a previous interview, you sank a lot of money into this. So can you get a sense of what that investment was like?
My God. So I completely upgraded the brew system. So we went from a side-by-side 3-barrel system from Colorado brew system with single wall plastic tanks to a fully jacketed Psycho brew system made in Michigan. And then we got a Blickman 3.5-barrel system. And we also bought a still when we moved into distilling operations. So at our scale, a 3.5 barrel, that whole system with the glycol machine, that's probably $125,000 worth of stuff. The washer and dryers that you're looking at are surprisingly $11,000 a piece. They're tanks and they are robust machines. They can handle quite a bit. Those handle 3 loads at a time, and they're very nice to look at aesthetically. So it's sort of almost a marketing play too, right? Pinball machines, there's got to be 70 or 80,000 in pinball machines too. All that stuff's generating revenue, and it's also all paid off. So in that way, we're lucky. So we're able to invest more in the audio side.
But at the time, we're probably thinking, "Oh man, I just
blew
through several $100,000 here, and it's all going to come crashing down."
Oh yeah, and it wasn't paid off then. You know, it was all loans that I had up. None of this stuff is, I'm not like independently wealthy or something. Like I said, I grew up in a blue collar family. I remember spending my last $5 being out of college. So yeah, all this stuff was all on loans, and we just had to make it work. So when the pandemic started, we started canning our own beer. I mentioned that we had some alternative sort of entertainment. So we have this thing called Dead Ed, who Dustin Bolches is the guy that books all the shows. He's an extremely talented musician, but also just really prevalent in the scene. And he dresses up in this character sort of like the Tales from the Crypt, and he would host movie nights pre-pandemic. Well, we got him to dress up and deliver in the delivery van. So you could go to the website and sign up and sort of like a Candygram, send Dead Ed to your mom's house or something like that, So I'm sure that actually scared quite a few people during the pandemic, seeing the Reaper come out
the room.
Yeah. But we did that with comedians too, so they could go up and do a knock-knock joke. And we even did it with drag queens. So you could order a drag queen to send it to somebody. So that took off. That kept us social media growing and promotion going. We were able to continue to keep the brewers going. That lasted. It got pretty tight. I sold some of those pinball machines and some stuff so I could keep things going until PPP kicked in. Then I had gracious landlords, and once PPP kicked in, I just paid them all for a year.
So you were able to take advantage of the PPP loan.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a backup plan person, and it was difficult for me to not know what was going to happen. So yeah, I definitely researched as many grants as possible, and big shout out to Musical Family Tree here in town. They helped us out a lot. We got the PPP money. We were able to get SVOG, the shuttered venue operator grant as well. Yeah, so that allowed us to buy the stuff that we needed to do the shows outside during that time.
Oh, okay. So you moved the shows outside.
Well, yeah. So that property that's been contentious now. Post-COVID, during COVID, you were allowed to do things outside. Everybody had to do everything outside. Now, without a permit, you can't do anything outside on that property. So
this is the original property.
Yeah, at Black Circle, I only do a few shows a year or outside now because I need to get a special event permit to do temporary structures and stuff outside.
So at Loom, you're leasing that space?
Yeah, that space is leased. The landlord there is where I got, because of COVID, it's been difficult to try to find funding, I guess traditional funding for anything. So that landlord actually, we sort of had a private equity deal to lend me the money to buy the new building in a very traditional way. It's a 10-year loan with a standard interest rate. So that worked out for me, just having that relationship and him trusting me because of seeing what the brands have done down there. And he's been great.
Let me ask again about the brewing, the beverage side of it.
Yeah, sure.
So were you just making beverages for your own locations? You weren't trying to get out and put them in supermarkets or put them in bars somewhere else?
At our scale, we really were just trying to make it for ourselves. We can make 4 or 5 kegs at a time, depending on the style of beer. So Dan started, he was probably the least experienced from a professional perspective. Each time we've got a new brewer, they've been more and more experienced. So it's interesting. I've branded away from the brewing, and we're probably making the best beer we've ever made because we have Steve Ruby from Blackacre that closed is brewing beer for us now. But another thing that's happened, just like across all sectors, grain prices are wild. So I trying to look up statistics for you last night, and it varies a lot depending on the source you're looking at. But just looking at our books in general, I think it's probably 70 or 80% higher than it was in 2020, like pre-pandemic. And they're also tacking on fuel surcharges and delivery fees and things like that. So where a month maybe cost me $700 to $900 to make beer before, it's maybe costing $2,000 now. So, and that's with being more efficient as well, with more efficient practices, better equipment, better brewers. So it's almost better for me to buy beer from someone else. So I'm lucky I already had that mix established where we have guest taps on anyway. And if our beer's on, that's a cool treat that you can only get there.
Gotcha. Okay. But I wouldn't be able to find it anywhere else.
Once in a while, somebody like Mayfair Tap Room might pick one up for an anniversary or something like that. But generally, probably not.
Now, in 2019, also, did I get this right? This is when you tried to get your MBA.
Yep.
You go back to IU Cali. And why did you want to get an MBA?
I had wanted to do it for a long time. I just wanted to sort of sharpen my skills. I wasn't particularly satisfied with sort of being at the top of the chain as a banker. There's nothing wrong with that job, and I love that job, but I didn't see where I was going to go any higher. And in fact, I tried to interview with some more J.P. Morgan corporate positions here downtown, and I just did not have the experience that they were looking for. And they all had MBAs, So I just thought, if nothing else, this can prove to myself that I can do that and I can learn something to apply to this business. But I went back with the MBA in the winter of 19 with full intention of continuing to stay in corporate. Like I said, I just jumped out because there was too much to manage during the pandemic with the two businesses.
Oh, okay. You still wanted to have some sort of your foot in the corporate life.
Yeah, I think I interviewed at a couple other banks downtown here in like February of 2020.
So the idea is I'm going to up my skills, get a better job, get a better day job, essentially.
Yeah.
And then pandemic screws everything up. And you think, I just need to focus on these things while you're getting your MBA. So is there ever a moment in class where you're like, oh, aha, that's what I should have done?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from day one.
Meaning like, you learn something like related to running a business and you're like, oh, I wish I had known that.
In almost every class, I was able to take something and apply it to what we were doing immediately, which is incredible. So, I mean, and it's going to be basic to, again, a lot of your listeners, but learning Lean Six Sigma, and we were at that time using a production canning line and wondering why some of the stuff wasn't coming out as much as we went. Well, apply Six Sigma to it and figured it out, and it was perfect within a couple of weeks, So just little things like that. But my first course...
Tell people real quick what Six Sigma is.
Oh, yeah. So you're just refining a process. So you take samples of hundreds of cans that are going through. So in this case, we were weighing the cans to see how much they weighed, and we would find an average of that weight. And then you just want so many standard deviations away from that. If it's outside of that too many standard deviations and you would fail that particular one. So maybe a can is under or overfilled, we would fail that one, pull it off. So you're only getting, it's basically just streamlining the process. And eventually you develop a process so that you're not getting those outliers anymore. It's just more efficient and better product. Yeah. So that was the most obvious way that we applied that. But yeah, even just the first accounting course, and I had lots of accounting in undergrad. I was doing my own books, though, bookkeeping with Black Circle. And within 3 weeks of the accounting course, I hired a bookkeeper. Because I'm just like, and it immediately paid for itself. Just things like that.
So here in 2024, you survey all the things that you have done. And it sort of seems like they all just there wasn't any particular grand plan. Things happen. And you said, well, I think I need this. Well, I'm going to do this. What do you think about what you've created so far?
I'm extremely proud of what we have created so far. And I definitely want to give my staff a lot of the credit too. Again, I manifest things. I push things forward. I put all the anxiety on myself a lot, but they have been at the front lines of a lot of things so that I can continue to do these things. And you're right, there was never really a plan. I think in 2016, if you opened a brewery, a lot of people thought, that's it, I'm going to be able to retire on this, and I don't know if anyone that opened a brewery in 2016 has made much money, especially if you had multiple investors or whatnot. But I mean, I also looked at this statistic last night. There's like almost 10,000 breweries in the country now, and I think they're including tap rooms, but more are opening than closing still. So, but there's no growth. The growth is stagnating there. There is some growth in distilled spirits now, but I think I'm just...
And you guys are in that space too.
Yeah. Thanks to Sun King and Three Floyds, we're getting that legislation through. So, because before you could only do beer, wine, or liquor. Now you can do beer and wine or beer and liquor. And we use the exact same equipment to make liquor that we did with beer. We just needed to add a still, and that's it. So it makes a lot of sense. But it would be silly to think that the same thing isn't going to happen in the spirits at some point. So we just don't want to hang our hat on that. It's really great that we can do it, and it differentiates our product a little bit. We've definitely seen tremendous growth adding spirits because some people just don't drink beer or can't drink beer. So yeah, it's been an incredible add, but we need to just continue to diversify. And that's another thing, just, it's been driven home by the MBA program is, diversify that product and just don't have all your eggs in one basket.
So you were named to IBJ's 40 Under 40. Congratulations. Class of 2021. And at the time, you said that you left finance to focus on what fulfilled me and gave me a sense of purpose and to protect your mental health and also to make meaningful connections locally. What did you mean by that?
At that time, that was pre-pandemic, really. Well, that's not necessarily true. It was like, it was like bank time, but we weren't necessarily under such major restrictions, I guess. But what I was trying to do there was, if you're sitting in Carmel at a desk, you're seeing maybe not as much diversity as you might down in Broad Ripple or something like that. And certainly I could see that the people that I could help with what I knew and needed it the most were people that were down in my area down here. So basically with drag shows and comedy and some other things like that, we were able to find a lot more diversity and bring in different types of people. And I just feel like in connecting with those folks and connecting with people in the community by doing community cleanups, it just sounds so cliche, but that we all have so much more in common than we have differences. And we're unfortunately in a really divisive time, in Indiana in particular, about a lot of these things. So I think it's super important to get out in your community and be helping as many people or interacting with as many people as possible. Sitting at a desk in Carmel, it was great and I learned a lot. I love my people up there, but it definitely was, from a mental health perspective, a 9 to 5 is a lot different than working for yourself and building something and meeting all these other people. I was able to apply all those things that I learned at J.P. Morgan, such as, networking and just being, I consider myself an extrovert, and I really love to help people improve their lives financially. I think when I first got out of the bank, I started this thing called Broadway Advisors, and that was in part of the IBJ thing, the 40 Under 40. And what I was trying to do there was make what I did at the bank more accessible to more people for not much money. And nobody really had much. And what I found was I was helping people fix their credit or something like that. So I went ahead and dropped Broadway, but I've made my circle smaller. And what I do is, we set up a 401k so that the staff has some sort of retirement funds, because I wouldn't work anywhere that didn't have a retirement fund. So I'm not going to have them not do that. And then I have helped 3 of the employees over the last few years to either fix their credit and buy a home, or buy a home and then help them with the down payment. And it's just really pushing them out of the nest sort of thing. I think a lot of people think that buying a house is going to be some daunting task and they just never do it. But especially in the rate environment we were in the last few years, I just thought if I don't get these guys in a home while the rates are like this, they're going to be left behind. And so the folks that did now have this equity and this security that maybe the folks that don't have. But a stable employee is a lot better and more productive for me too. So it's not like I was grooming them to like be my employees forever or anything like that. But I do genuinely care how we interact at work and how they feel, and that they're at the end of this thing, that they're going to have something to show for themselves too.
Something else that you do that I think is valuable from a community standpoint, and I don't know if pioneers is necessarily the best word, might be overstating it, but I mean, you've got 2 viable businesses on 46th Street. We're talking about the corridor between like College and Keystone. And that, I mean, something that we've written about several times, I think is widely seen as the next sort of emerging commercial corridor. But you do need to have people to go in there and take those first risks and show that it's viable.
Well, if you looked around, especially back in the 2010, 2016 range when we opened, even probably now, breweries open in spaces that there's not much around sometimes, because we need a lot of space and we need cheap space to be able to produce things. So I think my biggest issue has always been that I am super conservative in the way that I approach things. I don't want to bite off too much that I can chew. So I made the tap room way too small at first. And we immediately had to waste a bunch of money building out and expanding the next year and getting another lease. And now I've moved 3 blocks away and now I've got another building. So yeah, as far as a plan, I mean, I think all these things would have been happening, but probably it should have happened in one spot. But yeah, I mean, 46th Street is great. At the time I lived at 49th and Carvel, so not very far away. The Nickel Plate Trail was supposed to be coming in, and there were whispers about it in 2016 anyway. So we signed that lease, and here we are almost 10 years later.
Right. So yeah, Black Circle Bar, I mean, you were literally right up against the path of the Nickel Plate Trail, which, and you probably understand the timeline for that much better than I do, but essentially being cleared right now for eventually, to be paved into a trail.
It has been paved, but they're having, it's my understanding they don't have the funding to go bridges over Keystone and Allisonville. So they're sort of redoing the sidewalks to do for example, it's at 46th and Keystone. They're going to have the Nickel Plate Trail cross at 46th and Keystone and then pick up the trail on the other side. So the portions of the trail that get up to 46th Street are actually paved, but they just still have to make that curve there. So we're excited. I mean, they're saying that it'll be done by the end of the year. And that could completely change our business.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
Another reason for the rebranding was just to sort of soften this thing, because we want to be able to pick up those folks that are on the trail coming in for just maybe an afternoon beer while you're riding your bike, or, grab a sandwich from next door or play some pinball, sit in the yard. We don't care, but we want to see more faces over there. Right now, there's nobody unless there's a show. And that's sort of why that evolved into a venue space. It's sort of a destination. Like, you need to be purposefully going over there, or else you're probably not going to go over there. There's just not anything over there.
But when you say rebranding and softening, what do you mean exactly by that?
I had read early on that you're supposed to have like the theater space be black so that the lights show up better. The lighting will show up better for shows. So I had painted everything in that room black. I mean, you walk in, it was like a cave, and it was just cool for a metal show. But I hired a company called Guide and Anchor in town. It's Sarah and Joey Potts. They moved down here from Chicago, probably most famously in Indy for doing all the 18th Street branding early on, 18th Street Brewing. But they did cosmetic brewing down here. They've worked with La Margarita in Fountain Square and his space called Proper, lots of other places. But they're just very, very talented at coming into a place, listening to your idea, and then interpreting it in an artful way. But SJ is also really big on colors, so bright colors. So we went from everything was black to now everything is green, red, and purple. And so just softening in that way, in the sense that like you wouldn't be like, come on, kids, let's get out of here. Like we want it to be like, we're not going to change our image too much, but we want it to be approachable.
The part that faces toward the trail, do I have this right? I mean, there are picnic tables and patio style.
Yeah, I built a deck out there so we could do the shows during COVID. I put out some 8 crushed limestone and put some picnic tables out there, build a little fence around it just to sort of appease excise and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that space is still there, but it's really not zoned for that. Again, like I said, I have to have a permit anytime to use it. So
not zoned for the music.
Not zoned for the music, not zoned for temporary structure. It's my understanding that it's not actually zoned for assembly, I think is what she's saying it. Now, on the zoning, it says live music with bar and patio. So it could be interpreted, my lawyer said it could be interpreted that you could have live music out there, but it could be interpreted that you can't do anything out there. So,
but people can hang out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no one's busting you for hanging out outside. But, if you have a big tent up outside and, a bunch of temporary structures, they just don't want any damage. And I understand that, but it's a hurdle.
So, I mean, you got enough to do right now.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything else that you've got planned? Or we're just going to work on the new space?
We just got the 10th Street location in September. We closed on that. We've got this stop work order, so I'm working through permitting process. It's the first time I've done it. It's bizarre to me that isn't more streamlined, but I can see why it gets people frustrated sometimes. But it's pretty much a bare bones. We're going to use it as an event space, so it won't be open all the time. It'll be open for certain special events, hopefully 2 or 3 times a month, and then we'll use it for studio space and stuff like that. But the build-out won't be extensive. We're not really changing the floor plan much. We're just fixing what was already there and going to make it look like it used to look like.
How much are you going to put into it, you think? Like investment-wise, outside of what you already paid for it?
I think I've already got, so $155 was the loan. I think I've probably already got that again in it. And we haven't even really started building out. I mean, a roof on a 7,000 square foot building, roof is like probably got 40 in that. HVAC throughout the whole thing. I mean, right there, you're looking in the 6-figure range, between those two things. So, I mean, and again, that's loans. So we have to pay that stuff off.
But you're a cautious man. I mean, you've got this figured out.
I think when you buy the building, you don't have to be as cautious. Every month I pay a payment on that thing. It's just like I tell my employees to buy a house. Like, we're building equity in that thing. That's how I'm paying myself, So it's not scary at all to me. It's very exciting. I'm excited to be a part of another corridor that really has so much potential. The 10th Street Near East Side is incredible. There's some incredible businesses over there. I was just at Tim & Company's yesterday getting my hinges for my old doors. Sam Square Pie just opened down there. We've got 10th Street Diner just got new ownership. They've got a new menu. Guide and Anchor's right next door to us. There's a lot of stuff going in, and it's a really exciting time on the east side too.
All right, well, let's check in a year or so and figure out how it all went.
Please do. Yeah, I would like to listen to this. And it's like a time capsule in a year. So see how I did.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for explaining all this.
Mason, I appreciate the opportunity. Anytime I can talk about my people, I love it.
My thanks again to Jesse Rice. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are some stories in the latest issue of IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, after not featuring an exhibit of chimpanzees in more than 35 years, the Indianapolis Zoo plans to showcase the primates in a big way with a $25 million habitat opening this month with 21 animals. IBJ's Dave Lindquist details how the zoo is trying to break new ground with this exhibit. Also in this week's paper, John Russell explains how new federal regulations could affect dozens of toxic coal ash ponds across the state. And Daniel Bradley examines how Fishers officials are changing the admission process for Geist Waterfront Park after the $16 million attraction whiffed on its visitor projections in its first year of operation. And again, you can find these stories in the latest print issue of IBJ or online at IBJ.com. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.